The small farming colony of Haven 12 was quiet most of the time. It was a human settlement far from the busy worlds of the galaxy. Most people there were farmers, mechanics, or simple workers trying to live peaceful lives. Among them lived a young boy named Ethan. Ethan was 12 years old. He was curious about everything. While other children liked to play games, Ethan loved looking at the stars. Every night he climbed to the roof of his family's small house and watched the sky. He always wondered what existed out there. Other worlds, other civilizations, maybe even other friends. But the people of Haven 12 did not think about such things. For them, the galaxy was dangerous. Ships rarely came to their colony, and when they did, people stayed away. One night, something strange happened. Ethan was on the roof again, staring at the stars. Then suddenly, a bright light cut across the sky. At first, he thought it was a meteor, but the light was too controlled. It slowed down. Then it began falling directly toward the forest outside the colony. A loud explosion echoed across the night. Ethan jumped down from the roof. The adults in the colony began shouting. Some thought pirates had arrived. Others believed it was just a broken satellite. But Ethan felt something different. Something important had fallen, and he wanted to see it. Without telling his parents, Ethan quietly slipped out of the house and ran toward the forest. The night air was cold. Smoke was rising above the trees. After 10 minutes of running, Ethan reached the crash site. A small metallic pod had crashed into the ground. It was badly damaged, and sparks were flying from its sides. Ethan slowly stepped closer. He had never seen technology like this before. The surface of the pod was covered in strange, glowing symbols. Suddenly, the door of the pod slowly opened. Ethan froze. Something was inside. At first, he thought it might be a robot, but then a small hand appeared. A small figure slowly crawled out of the pod. It was a girl, but not a human girl. Her skin had a soft silver glow. Her eyes were bright violet. Long white hair fell over her shoulders. She looked weak and scared. The alien girl collapsed onto the ground. Ethan stood there in shock. He had always wondered if aliens existed. Now, one was lying right in front of him. The girl slowly opened her eyes. When she saw Ethan, fear filled her face. She tried to stand, but she was too weak. Then suddenly the sky above them roared with loud engines. 3 dark ships appeared above the forest. They were not human ships. They looked sharp and aggressive like hunters. Red scanning lights swept across the trees. The alien girl grabbed Ethan's arm. Her voice was soft and broken. "They found me." Ethan did not understand her language completely, but he understood the fear in her eyes. The ships were searching for her. Soldiers began dropping from the ships into the forest. They were tall, armored aliens holding glowing weapons. The girl whispered again, "If they see me, they will kill me." Ethan's heart began beating fast. He was only a child, but he knew one thing. If he left her there, those soldiers would find her, and they would probably kill her. Ethan looked toward the colony. Then he looked back at the alien girl. Finally, he made a decision. "Come with me," he whispered. The girl did not understand his words, but she understood his hand reaching out to help her. Ethan helped her stand. She was very weak, but she tried to walk. Together, they moved quietly through the forest, while the soldiers searched nearby. Once a patrol passed only a few meters away from them, Ethan quickly pulled the girl behind a fallen tree. They stayed completely silent until the soldiers moved on. After a long and careful walk, they finally reached the edge of the colony. Behind Ethan's house was an old storage barn that no one used anymore. Ethan opened the door slowly and helped the girl inside. The barn smelled like dust and old metal tools, but it was safe. For now, the alien girl sat on the floor, breathing slowly. Ethan brought her some water and food from the house. At first she looked confused by human food, but she slowly ate. After a few minutes, she pointed to herself. "Lyra." Ethan smiled. "Lyra." Then he pointed to himself. "Ethan." The alien girl repeated the name softly. "Ethan." For the next few days, Ethan secretly cared for Lyra. He brought her food and blankets. He also helped repair a small device from her broken pod. Slowly, they began understanding each other. Lyra explained through simple words and drawings that she was not just any alien. She was the daughter of a powerful galactic ruler. Her family had been attacked by enemies who wanted to take control of their empire. She escaped in a small pod, but the hunters followed her. Ethan listened carefully. He did not understand everything, but he knew she was important, and she was alone. One night, The sound of engines returned. The hunter ships had found the colony. Bright searchlights moved across the buildings. Alien soldiers began landing everywhere. They were looking for Lyra. Lyra looked at Ethan with fear. Ethan thought for a moment. Then he smiled bravely. He pointed toward the forest. Then he pointed toward himself. Lyra understood. He was going to distract them. Before leaving, Lyra grabbed Ethan's hand. Her glowing eyes were filled with emotion. One day, she would never forget. "I will return," she said slowly. "Promise." Then she ran into the forest where her rescue signal was waiting. Ethan ran in the opposite direction. The soldiers quickly spotted him. They chased him across the colony while Lyra escaped. By the time they realized their mistake, a distant ship had already taken Lyra away from the planet. The hunters left the colony soon after, and the night finally became quiet again. Ethan never saw Lyra again. Years passed. Life returned to normal. But somewhere far beyond the stars, a promise was waiting. And one day, the entire galaxy would remember the boy who protected an alien girl. 10 years passed after the night of the falling star. The small colony of Haven 12 had changed a little, but it was still a quiet place. Farmers worked in the fields. Cargo ships sometimes visited the station. Most people there lived simple lives and rarely thought about the greater galaxy. Ethan was no longer a curious child. He was now 22 years old. He worked as a mechanic in the colony repair yard. Every day, he repaired farming machines, cargo drones, and transport engines. His hands were always covered with oil and metal dust. People in the colony knew Ethan as a hard worker. He was calm and friendly, but also quiet. Sometimes when work was finished, he still climbed onto the roof of his house and looked at the stars just like he did when he was a child. But now, his thoughts were different. He often remembered the strange alien girl from long ago, Lyra. For years he wondered if she survived. Maybe she returned safely to her people. Maybe she forgot about the small human boy who helped her. Sometimes Ethan even wondered if the whole memory was just a dream. The galaxy was very large after all. What were the chances that someone so important would ever return to a small forgotten colony? One peaceful morning, Ethan was working in the repair yard fixing a broken transport engine. Suddenly the ground shook slightly. At first he thought it was a mining explosion from the hills. Then the alarm sirens of the colony began screaming. Loud warning signals echoed through every street. People looked up at the sky. Ethan slowly stood and followed their eyes. Then he saw it. Dark shapes were appearing above the clouds. One ship, then another, then 10, then hundreds. Within minutes, the sky above Haven 12 was filled with enormous warships. They were unlike anything the colony had ever seen before. These ships were beautiful and terrifying at the same time. Their surfaces shined like polished silver, and blue energy lights glowed along their hulls. Massive weapon towers could be seen along the sides. The entire colony froze in fear. Some people began running for shelters. Others stared at the sky in complete shock. No pirate fleet could be this large. No normal fleet traveled with hundreds of battleships. Then the communication towers of the colony suddenly activated. A powerful voice filled every speaker in the settlement. The message was spoken in perfect human language. "This is the royal fleet of the Aurelian Empire. Remain calm. We come in peace." The people of the colony looked at each other with confusion. Very few humans had ever heard about the Aurelian Empire, but the few who had knew one thing. It was one of the strongest civilizations in the galaxy. Then, the message continued. "The Aurelian Queen requests the presence of a human citizen. His name is Ethan Walker. Please send him to the landing field." The entire colony turned to stare at Ethan. Even Ethan himself looked confused. Why would the queen of an alien empire ask for him? He was just a mechanic from a small farming colony. Nothing about this made sense. A few minutes later, one enormous ship slowly descended from the fleet. It was larger than any building in the colony. Golden lights glowed along its surface, and elegant symbols covered its hull. The ship landed gently outside the settlement. A long ramp slowly opened. Dozens of tall alien soldiers walked down the ramp. Their armor shined like silver metal, and their weapons looked advanced beyond human technology. But they did not attack anyone. Instead, they stood in two straight lines forming a path toward the ship. One officer stepped forward. He looked at Ethan calmly. "You are Ethan Walker." Ethan nodded slowly. The officer bowed his head slightly. "The Queen awaits you. Please come with us." The crowd began whispering nervously. Some people were afraid. Others were curious. But Ethan felt something different, a strange feeling deep inside his memory. Something about this moment felt familiar. As he walked toward the giant ship, he looked once more at the sky. The entire fleet still hovered above the colony like a silent army, hundreds of ships waiting for him. Ethan followed the soldiers up the ramp. Inside the ship, everything looked incredible. The walls glowed with soft blue light. The floors looked like smooth crystal. Strange alien symbols moved slowly across floating screens. Human technology looked primitive compared to this. The soldiers guided Ethan through long golden hallways. Finally, they reached enormous doors at the end of the corridor. The officer turned to Ethan. "Beyond these doors is the royal throne chamber. You will speak directly to the Queen of the Aurelian Empire." The doors slowly opened. Ethan stepped inside. The room was massive. Tall columns reached high toward the ceiling, and glowing banners hung along the walls. Dozens of alien nobles and officers stood in silence on both sides of the hall. At the far end of the chamber was a beautiful throne made of shining crystal and gold. And sitting on that throne was the queen. At first, Ethan could only see her glowing eyes. Then she slowly stood. Her long silver hair moved gently behind her. Her violet eyes looked directly at him. Ethan suddenly felt his heart stop for a moment. He recognized those eyes. Those same glowing eyes from the forest 10 years ago, the frightened alien girl he once protected. But she was no longer a scared child. Now she looked powerful, confident, and graceful, the ruler of an entire empire. The queen slowly walked down the long hall toward him. Every alien in the chamber watched in complete silence. When she finally stopped in front of Ethan, she smiled softly. Her voice was calm but full of emotion. "Hello, Ethan. It has been a long time." Ethan stared at her in shock. "Lyra." The queen nodded gently. "Yes, and I promised you something long ago." The entire royal court watched carefully as the queen slowly lowered herself to one knee in front of the human mechanic. Gasps filled the chamber. No ruler of the Aurelian Empire had ever knelt before anyone, but Lyra did. "You protected me when I was weak." She looked up at Ethan with the same warm eyes he remembered from the forest. "Now I have returned, and this time I will keep my promise." The throne chamber became completely silent. Dozens of alien nobles stood frozen in shock. None of them could believe what they were seeing. The queen of the Aurelian Empire was kneeling in front of a human, a simple human. In the entire history of the empire, this had never happened before. The guards looked confused. The officers stared at each other. Even the royal advisors did not know how to react. But Queen Lyra remained on one knee. Her glowing violet eyes were calm as she looked up at Ethan. Ethan himself could barely understand what was happening. Only a few minutes ago, he was fixing a broken farming engine. Now, the ruler of one of the most powerful empires in the galaxy was kneeling in front of him. He quickly stepped forward. "You should not kneel to me," Ethan said quietly. "You are the queen." Lyra slowly stood up. A soft smile appeared on her face. "To my people, I am their queen," she said. "But to you, I am the girl you saved." The words echoed across the massive chamber. Many nobles suddenly began whispering. Some of them looked angry. Others looked worried. One tall alien general finally stepped forward. His armor was darker than the others, and several battle marks covered his chest plate. His name was General Varak. He was one of the most powerful commanders of the empire. His voice was deep and serious. "Your Majesty," he said respectfully, "may I speak?" Lyra nodded. "You may." The general looked directly at Ethan. "This human is the one you told us about," Varak said. "The child from the distant world." Lyra nodded again. "Yes, he protected me when I was hunted. He risked his life to help me escape." The general remained silent for a moment. Then he spoke again. "But he is still only a human." The chamber grew tense. Varak continued speaking carefully. "Our empire controls thousands of worlds. Our enemies watch every move we make. If they discover that the queen places special trust in a human," he stopped before finishing the sentence. But everyone understood the meaning. The empire could look weak. Lyra's expression did not change. "Strength is not only measured by fleets and weapons," she replied calmly. "Sometimes strength is loyalty." Varak looked at Ethan again. "This human may have helped you long ago," he said. "But the empire cannot place its future in the hands of someone we do not know." Several nobles nodded in agreement. The tension in the room began rising. Ethan could feel hundreds of alien eyes watching him. Some were curious, some were angry, some clearly did not trust him. Lyra stepped forward. "The Empire will trust him," she said firmly. The room went silent again. "Because I trust him." But General Varrock was not finished. He slowly turned toward the Queen again. "With respect, Your Majesty, trust must be proven." The Queen raised one eyebrow. "What do you suggest?" The general activated a floating holographic screen. A star map appeared in the center of the chamber. Several red warning symbols flashed across it. "The Dravari fleets have begun attacking our border systems again," Varrock explained. The nobles immediately became serious. The Dravari were a violent alien species that had been fighting the Aurelian Empire for many years. "They have destroyed 3 stations in the last week," Varrock continued. "Our fleets are preparing for battle." Then he looked at Ethan again. "If this human truly deserves the Queen's trust, let him prove it." A wave of whispers spread through the chamber. Lyra looked at the general carefully. "What kind of test?" Varrock answered immediately. "We will give him command of a small strike fleet. He will lead the mission against a Dravari patrol force near our border. If he succeeds," the general paused slightly, "then the Empire will recognize him as worthy of the Queen's trust." The room waited for the Queen's reaction. Lyra looked at Ethan. Her eyes showed concern. She did not want him placed in danger again. But before she could speak, Ethan stepped forward. "I will do it." The entire chamber turned toward him. Lyra looked surprised. "You do not have to accept," she said quietly. Ethan shook his head. "You defended me when I was a child," he replied. "Now it is my turn to stand with you." The room became silent again. Even the general seemed slightly impressed by the human's courage. Lyra studied Ethan for a moment. Finally, she nodded slowly. "Very well." She turned toward the royal court. "The mission will begin tomorrow." The nobles bowed their heads in acceptance, but many of them were still unsure. A human commanding imperial ships was something no one had ever seen before. As the meeting ended, Lyra walked closer to Ethan. Her voice became softer. "You do not understand how dangerous the Dravari are." Ethan smiled slightly. "Maybe not. But humans are very good at surviving dangerous situations." Lyra watched him for a moment. Then she smiled as well. Perhaps the Empire was about to learn something new about humanity. Far away in space, the Dravari fleet was already moving. They had no idea that a human mechanic from a small farming colony was about to face them. And soon, the entire Empire would discover what humans were truly capable of. The next day, the entire royal fleet was busy preparing for battle. Inside the massive command station of the Aurelian flagship, dozens of officers moved quickly between glowing screens and control panels. The Dravari threat was growing every hour. Their ships had already destroyed several outposts near the border of the Empire. Now a patrol fleet of the enemy had been detected near an important star route. This was where Ethan's mission would take place. Many officers were still nervous about the situation. They did not understand why a human was given command of Imperial ships, but the Queen had spoken, and her word was law. Ethan stood inside the command room looking at the large star map floating in front of him. Several blue symbols represented the Aurelian ships under his command. There were only 8 ships. They were fast attack cruisers designed for quick missions. But compared to the Dravari fleet, they were small. General Varrock stood beside Ethan, watching him carefully. The general still did not fully trust the human. "This mission will not be easy," Varrock said in his deep voice. "The Dravari patrol contains at least 12 warships. That means they outnumber us." Ethan nodded slowly. "That is fine." Varrock looked slightly confused. "Fine." "Yes," Ethan replied calmly. "In human history, we have fought many battles where we were outnumbered." The general crossed his arms. "And how did humans win such battles?" Ethan pointed toward the star map. "We stopped fighting the enemy the way they expected." Varrock remained silent as Ethan studied the map more carefully. The Dravari ships were moving through a narrow asteroid field near the border system. Most commanders would attack directly, but Ethan had a different idea. He turned toward the officers controlling the fleet. "I want all ships to power down their weapons and reduce engine signals," he ordered. The officers looked confused. "You want to hide?" one asked. Ethan nodded. "We will move through the asteroid field and wait." General Varrock frowned. "That sounds like an ambush." Ethan smiled slightly. "That is exactly what it is." The fleet moved quietly through space. The 8 Aurelian ships entered the asteroid field and slowly positioned themselves between the massive floating rocks. All weapons remained silent. All engines were running at low power. To outside sensors, the ships looked like empty metal objects drifting in space. Several hours later, the Dravari fleet appeared. Their ships were dark and jagged, looking like giant predators. 12 warships moved through the asteroid field confidently. They believed the border was safe. Inside the command room, Ethan watched carefully. He waited. The enemy ships moved deeper into the field. Closer, closer. Then Ethan finally spoke. Now, the silent asteroid suddenly exploded with blue light. 8 Aurelian cruisers activated their weapons at the same time. Energy cannons fired powerful beams directly at the center of the Dravari formation. The first enemy ship exploded instantly. The rest of the Dravari fleet panicked. They did not expect an attack from inside the asteroid field. Several ships tried to turn around, but the narrow space made movement difficult. Ethan quickly gave new orders. Ships 3 and 4 moved to the left side, cut off their escape route. The cruisers moved perfectly through the asteroids. Their small size allowed them to maneuver faster than the larger Dravari warships. Another enemy ship was destroyed, then another. Inside the Dravari fleet, confusion was spreading quickly. They could not understand how such a small fleet was defeating them. General Varak watched the battle in silence. He was beginning to understand the human strategy. The battle was not about strength, it was about control. Ethan used the environment of space itself as a weapon. The asteroid field trapped the enemy ships and limited their movement. One by one, the Dravari ships were destroyed. Within minutes, only 4 enemy vessels remained. The Dravari commander realized the situation was hopeless. The remaining ships tried to escape, but Ethan had predicted this. "Activate forward cannons," he ordered calmly. A final wave of energy blast shot across the battlefield. The last Dravari warship exploded in a bright flash of light. The battle was over. 8 ships had defeated 12. Inside the command room, the officers were completely silent. They stared at the battlefield display in disbelief. General Varak slowly turned toward Ethan. His expression had changed. The doubt in his eyes was gone. Instead, there was respect. "That was unexpected," the general said. Ethan smiled slightly. "Humans are very good at creative problem solving." Varak gave a small nod. The fleet soon began its return journey. News of the victory traveled quickly through the royal fleet. By the time Ethan returned to the flagship, the entire empire had already heard about the battle. A human had commanded an imperial fleet, and he had won. When Ethan entered the throne chamber again, the atmosphere was completely different from before. The nobles were no longer whispering with doubt. Now they were watching him with curiosity and respect. Queen Lyra stood from her throne as Ethan approached. "You succeeded," she said with pride. Ethan nodded. "The mission is complete." General Varak stepped forward and addressed the royal court. "The human has proven his ability," the general announced. "He defeated the Dravari patrol fleet without losing a single ship." The nobles looked impressed. Slowly, one by one, they bowed their heads toward Ethan. The Empire was beginning to understand something important. Humans might be new to the galaxy, but they were far from weak, and this human in particular had already changed the future of the Empire. But the greatest moment of the story had not yet arrived, because Queen Lyra still had one final promise to fulfill, and soon the entire galaxy would hear it. The victory against the Dravari fleet spread across the Aurelian Empire faster than anyone expected. Military stations began sending messages of congratulations. Border commanders praised the strategy that defeated the enemy patrol without losing a single ship. Many officers were still surprised that the plan came from a human. Inside the royal flagship, the atmosphere had completely changed. The same nobles who once doubted Ethan were now watching him with respect. Some of them even bowed when he walked past them in the halls. But Ethan did not feel like a hero. He still felt like the same mechanic from Haven 12. All he wanted was to understand why Lyra had truly come back. That evening, the royal court gathered once again inside the great throne chamber. Hundreds of officials filled the massive room. Generals, advisors, diplomats, and noble families were all present. Everyone wanted to hear the queen speak. Queen Lyra walked slowly to the center of the chamber. Her long silver hair moved gently behind her, and the glowing crown above her head shined brightly. The room became completely silent. General Varak stood near the front with the other commanders. Ethan stood beside him, feeling slightly uncomfortable with so many eyes watching him. Lyra raised her hand, and the royal speakers activated. "People of the Aurelian Empire," she began. "Today we celebrate a victory. our fleet defeated the Dravari patrol and protected our border worlds. Several nobles nodded proudly, but Lyra continued speaking. This victory was achieved because of someone who does not belong to our empire. Many people in the chamber turned to look at Ethan again. Lyra slowly walked toward him. This human once saved my life. The room became quiet again. 10 years ago, when I was only a child, I escaped from enemies who destroyed my home fleet. I crashed on a distant human colony. For many days, I was hunted by soldiers who wanted me dead. Her voice became softer. But a human boy protected me. She stopped directly in front of Ethan. He gave me food when I was weak. He hid me from the hunters. And when the enemy soldiers came, he risked his own life to distract them so I could escape. The entire court listened carefully. Even the proud nobles could feel the importance of those words. Lyra continued. That boy believed he would never see me again. But I never forgot him. She turned back toward the royal court. For 10 years, I searched the galaxy for him. Some nobles looked surprised. The queen of an empire had personally searched for one human. Lyra looked at Ethan again. And now I have finally found him. The room waited quietly. Everyone felt that something important was about to happen. Lyra slowly raised Ethan's hand. Then she spoke the words that shocked the entire chamber. I did not return only to thank him. Gasps spread across the court. I returned to claim him. The silence that followed felt heavy. Several nobles whispered to each other. Some looked completely stunned. General Varrock watched carefully but said nothing. Lyra continued speaking with calm confidence. From the moment he saved me, I made a promise that one day I would return. And when I returned, he would never stand alone again. The nobles were now clearly uncomfortable. One advisor stepped forward carefully. Your Majesty, do you mean to grant him a reward? Lyra shook her head slowly. No. The advisor looked confused. Then what do you mean? Lyra's voice became stronger. I mean that Ethan of Earth will stand beside the throne. The chamber exploded with whispers. No human had ever held a position near the imperial throne before. The advisor looked shocked. But Your Majesty, he is not Aurelian. He is human. Lyra nodded. Yes, that is exactly why this moment matters. She turned toward the nobles again. For thousands of years, our empire believed we were the strongest civilization. But strength is not only power. She pointed gently toward Ethan. Strength is courage. Strength is loyalty. And this human has already proven both. General Varrock finally stepped forward. His voice was calm but respectful. Your Majesty, he said, the human has indeed proven his ability. But the council must understand your decision clearly. Lyra looked directly at him. You want me to explain my decision to the Empire? Varrock nodded. Yes. Lyra smiled slightly. Very well. She took Ethan's hand again and turned to face the entire royal court. Today I announce a new position within the Aurelian Empire. The nobles waited carefully. The title will be Protector of the Throne. Many officers looked curious. Lyra continued. The Protector will stand beside the Queen in times of war and peace. He will advise the throne and defend the empire. The room remained silent. Then Lyra spoke the final words. And that Protector will be Ethan. The royal court froze in shock. But this time something different happened. General Varrock slowly lowered his head. Then he bowed toward Ethan. The other generals followed. One by one, the nobles of the empire began bowing. The message was clear. The empire had accepted the human, but Lyra still had one final truth left to reveal, and it would change Ethan's life forever. The throne chamber remained silent after the queen's announcement. Hundreds of nobles, generals, and advisors stood frozen in place. They had just witnessed something that had never happened in the history of the Aurelian Empire. A human had been chosen to stand beside the throne. Ethan himself was still trying to understand everything. Only a few days ago, he had been repairing broken engines on a small farming colony. Now the ruler of one of the most powerful empires in the galaxy had given him a title that placed him beside her, Protector of the Throne. Ethan looked at Lyra. Are you sure about this? He asked quietly. Lyra smiled gently. I have been sure for 10 years. Her glowing violet eyes were calm and confident. The royal court slowly began to accept the moment. General Varrock stepped forward again. This time his expression carried respect instead of doubt. Ethan of Earth, the general said, you have proven your courage and your ability. On behalf of the Imperial fleet, I accept the Queen's decision. He lowered his head in a formal bow. The other commanders followed him. Soon, the entire throne chamber was filled with nobles bowing toward the human. Ethan felt overwhelmed. He had never wanted power or fame, but he also understood something important. Lyra had trusted him, and now an entire empire was trusting him as well. Lyra turned toward the royal court. "Today marks the beginning of a new chapter for our empire," she said. "For centuries we have looked at other civilizations with distance, but the galaxy is changing." She gestured toward Ethan. "Humans may be new among the stars, but they possess something rare: courage in impossible situations, creativity in the face of danger, and loyalty to those they protect." Many nobles listened carefully. Some of them had already begun studying human history after the battle with the Dravari fleet. They had discovered something surprising. Humans had survived countless wars, disasters, and struggles on their home world. Despite everything they had endured, they continued to explore the stars. The Empire was beginning to understand that humanity might become one of the most important civilizations in the future galaxy. Lyra stepped closer to Ethan. "There is something else the court must know," she said. The room became quiet again. "When I was a child hiding on that human colony, I was afraid. My empire was under attack. My family was gone. I believed I had lost everything." Her voice softened. "But then a human boy appeared. He had no power, no army, and no reason to help me. Yet he still protected me." Lyra looked at Ethan. "That moment changed my life." Ethan remembered that night clearly. The frightened alien girl hiding in the old barn. The hunter ships searching the sky. At that time he had not known she would become a queen. He had simply helped someone who needed help. Lyra continued speaking. "During the years that followed, I rebuilt the empire. I defeated the enemies who attacked us. But I always remembered the promise I made." The court listened carefully. "I promised that one day I would return. And when I returned, I would stand beside the one who protected me." She gently held Ethan's hand again. "I did not come to claim a servant. I came to claim a partner." The nobles exchanged surprised looks. But this time no one argued. They had seen Ethan's courage. They had seen his intelligence during the battle. And they had seen the Queen's loyalty. General Varek spoke again. "Then today we celebrate not only a victory," he said, "but the beginning of a new alliance." He turned toward Ethan. "Between the Aurelian Empire and humanity." Lyra nodded proudly. Outside the massive flagship, the entire Imperial fleet waited in orbit above Haven 12. Hundreds of powerful warships filled the sky. When the news of the Queen's decision spread through the fleet, the reaction was immediate. Officers began sending messages across the Empire. Within hours, the story reached dozens of star systems. A human had been chosen as protector of the Aurelian throne. Across the galaxy, many civilizations began talking about the event. Some were curious. Some were impressed. Some were nervous. But everyone understood one thing. Humanity had just taken its first true step onto the galactic stage. Back inside the throne chamber, the ceremony finally ended. The nobles slowly left the hall, while the royal guards returned to their positions. Soon only Ethan and Lyra remained near the throne. Ethan looked around the enormous chamber. "This is a lot different from a repair yard," he said with a small laugh. Lyra smiled. "Yes, it is. But you will get used to it." Ethan looked at her carefully. "You really searched the entire galaxy for me?" Lyra nodded. "I gave my word. Keeping promises is important to my people." Ethan smiled slightly. "Humans believe that too." Lyra walked toward the large window behind the throne. From there, they could see the entire fleet floating in space, hundreds of ships glowing like stars. "This empire will face many challenges in the future," she said. "But now I will not face them alone." She looked at Ethan again. "And neither will you." Ethan nodded. 10 years ago, he had helped a frightened alien girl escape from hunters. Now that same girl had returned as a queen, and together they were about to lead one of the most powerful empires in the galaxy. Far beyond the stars, new threats were already rising. New wars, new discoveries, new civilizations waiting to be met. But one thing had already become clear. The galaxy had just learned something important about humanity. Never underestimate a human who protects the people they care about. Because sometimes, the smallest act of kindness can change the fate of an entire empire. And sometimes, a promise made in childhood can reshape the future of the entire galaxy.